Today we'll be going over an actualize.org video, why valuable things require development over time. Wondering about value, wondering about development, wondering about what types of investments we must take to actually develop some particular things. We'll give lots of examples. And maybe a bit of a hint on the types of fruits that you can glean from this sort of long-term mature development over time. So I think it's going to be quite interesting. It's a nice video, lots of things that we can jump on and add a little bit extra nuance too. So if it's something that you like the video, and please subscribe if you want to see a little bit more of this stuff. Let's get right into it.
This episode's going to be very practical, so pay attention.
Okay.
This will change your life right here. This one simple idea. The idea is, I want you to notice that there is a category or class of things which can be achieved in your life only through a slow, steady, consistent investment into that thing over a period of years on a daily basis.
Okay, this is the first couple seconds of the video, very clear layout here. You want a consistent, slow, steady, over many years, different ways to develop and change essentially the way that you view the world. We'll get into all the examples, but it's changing fundamentally how you interact in the world. These are things that you need a long, long period of time to develop. So, very important to start.
That's it. That's the entire notion. Mm-hmm. If you grok this notion will change your whole life. This is so significant.
Okay, very significant.
I'll share a lot of examples here to illustrate what exactly this notion means. Mm-hmm. But again, what I'm saying is that there are certain things that you can accomplish in your life only if you invest on a daily basis, every single day.
Every day.
For years.
Years.
A little bit at a time. Mm-hmm. Which ultimately accretes to some amazing result that you cannot get any other way. You cannot purchase it, and you cannot build it overnight. And there is no magic pill you can take that will leapfrog that process for you the way that everybody wants.
Okay, so we have to, we're already here. This is he's putting a lot of emphasis here to start the video. So there are some things that require daily practice. And there are a lot of communities that may say certain things like, if you're not drinking tea every day, you're not drinking tea. Or an artist must at least draw a line every single day to be an artist. You know, there's some ridiculous things that people say like that. But we can imagine, I think we'll get more into this a little bit later, we can imagine how much time it takes to learn how to read, or how much time it takes to think more religiously, or to think more scientifically, or to be educated at all. And these types of things require so much effort in order to mold your primary way of thinking, or your the instantaneous way of thinking, to be in a particular mode. It's very difficult to do in those instances. It's probably even a little bit harder for people who are adults and already have particular ways of engaging in the world, and they want to grow even further. So that's what we're saying.
In a sense, this is the ultimate key to success in life.
The ultimate key to success in life. All right, we're going to skip forward a little bit because that's interesting and helpful, and that's the framing of this whole conversation. We're starting with that, and we're going to move over into
to be well educated.
A bit of an example about education. What does it even mean to be well educated, and how do we do that?
So How do you become really well educated? You read every single day, and you do it for decades. And you listen to podcasts or to videos, and you listen to lectures, and you contemplate, and you take notes, and then you read some more, and you go to classes, and maybe you go to school, maybe you go to university, and then that's not enough. You continue after that as well. It's a sort of commitment to lifelong learning. And you keep doing that for a long time, and then at some point you become very well educated.
It's like magic. At some point it just happens. You're doing something over time, and at some point you just are magically educated. And Leo does go a little bit into some fear tactics a little bit in this video, which I'm going to not like very much, but I do want to point out something here. He did not point this out. This is what I'm pointing out, that we actually do this already. So he's going to talk about how most people don't put in the effort to actually grow and change and put in the investment to develop valuable skills. I would put it in a different way. We do put in the time to develop skills and habits. They're just not valuable generally. So every hour of the day, every moment of the day, we are training and we are developing particular ways of interacting in the world. But we're just not doing it consciously generally. Most of the time, we're not doing it consciously. So we are building up these habits that are going to be, they're going to become somehow the way that we are. Welcome back. Hey, Rajiv, what's up? They become the way that we are. So if we're constantly angry at people, if we're constantly mean to people, or if we're constantly, making jokes at other people's expense, eventually, magically, that just becomes who we are because we have put in the training to be that type of person. So we want to be aware of that too. But Leo doesn't quite get into that. Just want to point that out. But you do a lot of work. You got to read, you got to study, you have to practice, and eventually you'll be well educated. It's not something that you can do very quickly. It's not something you can just do one video to learn about, or one seminar or something ridiculous like that. You have to learn. Lifelong commitment, as he calls it. It's very important.
But it's going to take thousands of hours. And nobody is going to do it for you. Mm-hmm. You can't outsource it to anybody. And nobody is going to push you, really, to become very well educated. Sure, your parents might push you to get good grades, or they might push you to go to university and to get a degree. But that is not the same thing as being well educated.
Unfortunately not, right? We're not.
And even your teachers.
Even your teachers. It's so unfortunate because we don't have conscious communities at the moment. So it's difficult for us to outsource any of this sort of value, like really, really, really valuable skills. Presumably, if we did have very conscious communities, we could sort of splinter off and have some people do particular things and be well educated in some ways, and other people be well versed in politics or something, and other people be well versed in whatever they're well versed in, and we all have trust for each other, and we can deeply understand that we're all working together, and the other people are developed maturely in ways that are actually valuable or useful for each other. And we can outsource, but we don't have that at the moment. There is no sort of conscious communities that are developing together and encouraging each other to do healthy behaviors and encouraging each other to be more mature in how they're engaging in the world. We don't have this, unfortunately, right now. So it would be nice if y'all were nice to your friends and encouraging them to do healthy things. And hopefully you find a community of people who are encouraging you to be more wise or to be more well educated, or all of those nice, lovely things that we want to do and develop in ourselves, and that do require a lot of development over time. But unfortunately, at the moment, we don't get a lot of this. No one's going to help. No one's going to really push. So that's where we are right now. You got to kind of do it on your own.
Your teachers will push you to do your homework assignments, and they may push you to study or cram for an exam, And they may even inspire you or push you to learn some field or some aspect of a field.
Yep. And this is exactly what Rajiv is saying right here. In India, they're only interested in grades and not what you learn. It's the same way everywhere else, man. It's the same way everywhere else. No one really cares about the actual being well educated. It's about getting some random, I mean, it's not random, it's not arbitrary, but there's a measure for grades, and it doesn't really translate to actually deeply understanding the material, unfortunately.
If you have a good teacher. But a teacher is not going to really be there holding your hand and guiding you towards becoming a well-educated human. That's something only you can do on your own if you develop that vision and then you work towards it every single day. And if you don't work towards it every single day, then you won't become well-educated.
You won't. Remember, again, you're essentially working towards the opposite. You're working every day towards not being well-educated. Essentially, that's one way of putting it. If you're not working every day to be well-educated, you're working every day to not be well-educated. And that work is going to pay off in really, really bad ways. All right, we're going to skip forward a little bit more here to learning about what foolish people do and how they try to develop.
You can't build something like that overnight.
That's your being well-educated. It's impossible.
And it takes a real commitment and vision and a very patient approach to what you're doing and consistency on a daily basis. Building and building inch by inch by inch by inch that brand.
Remember, again, he's doing this, like, this is this maybe second or third time emphasizing this. Daily, consistent practice or development for brands, for education. We'll go into other things for emotional maturity, for lots of things, for spiritual stuff. We'll get all into all those things. It's very important.
See, we have this attitude, and the more foolish you are, the more you have this attitude of wanting some big result quickly. Like, Leo, tell me what I could do to become enlightened tomorrow. Or, Leo, what can I do to break out of wage slavery tomorrow or by the end of the year? And something like enlightenment or something like breaking free of wage slavery and becoming totally financially independent, these would be two more examples of things that you cannot just buy or outsource or get done very quickly without being patient about it. These are things that require long-term, consistent investment.
Not an overnight thing.
This means you have to have a vision, you have to have a plan, you have to follow through on that plan, you have to be very disciplined about it every single day.
Consistent, daily.
Chipping away at it. And you have to be very patient. And then you can achieve a result like being totally financially independent. And then you can bask in that result and you can enjoy that result for the rest of your life.
Doesn't that sound nice? And the unfortunate thing is that it will be difficult to start, of course, because the results are not obvious as you're working, daily, consistently. The results aren't going to be extremely obvious. Maybe to start, there'll be some sort of boost of results, but then there's going to be a long period of very incremental things that don't seem initially to, you won't be sensitive to it, unfortunately. But there will be a time where it becomes a bit better, a bit more obvious. And when you take a step back and see how well or how far you've come, that's when you will definitely be a lot more that's when you'll really appreciate the power of this sort of really, really long-term investment in this long development, in this long-standing practice, consistent daily practice to develop whatever it is you're developing, your brand, spirituality, emotional maturity. There are many other things that we talk about here.
So you need to be good at sort of spotting these nonlinear payoffs that you can get with your investments. So that's sort of what the actualized brand is built upon. And the videos are all supposed to interconnect in a very profound way for those who want to interconnect them all.
So this is good. We're just going to learn a little bit about how Leo's doing it with his brand and what his whole project of actualize.org. We're going to learn a little bit about his inner workings and how he sees his project. He thinks of this as something that he's developing over long term, right? He makes videos every single week, and he's been doing it for many years. And he thinks that the payoffs are going to be very massive, but not obvious initially, right? Not something that you immediately see. He said non-linear payoffs. And let's try to understand his vision a little bit about how that works, and how these things are going to grow and interact with itself to create such a big effect.
Willing to watch them all. And that will produce a certain effect on your mind, and it will produce a sort of level of personal development that you can't get from reading any self-help book or from any other single self-help teacher. And we're interconnecting so many different kinds of perspectives, scientific perspectives and spiritual perspectives and religious perspectives and philosophical perspective and all these different people and models, and we're interconnecting. That produces something that's way more than the sum of its parts. And see, I had that vision 10 years ago.
You have to, this is beautiful, because we love this idea of having some system, some way of thinking about the world, right? And he's got it, and he's somehow synthesizing this sort of scientific worldview, philosophical worldview, spiritual, blah, 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 all these different types of worldviews. And he's applying lots of things to different areas, to many more expansive areas. It's expanding and expanding. His model for the world, his way of seeing things, is growing. It's becoming ever expansive and including more things. And of course, it's going to be a bit rocky. It's kind of a struggle sometimes to have something apply to something that it doesn't already apply to, right? He has some model of the world, and most people start off scientific. He was kind of a person who started off scientific. He had a model of the world that was mostly scientific, but then he wanted to stretch that to have it apply to more philosophical things. So he started learning philosophy, and that was interesting, and it was a bit of growing pains at first, but then that growth, that expansion, I don't know how to properly describe this, but it has this sort of non-linear payoff. It just exponentially shoots up to the benefits that you can get. And benefit isn't quite the right word. Maybe it is here, but not always. It becomes so much more all-encompassing. And, well, it's a very nice process here. And the same thing happens when he then switches over to wanting to include more spiritual things, and it grows and grows. And then as he's doing this, it justifies, it's sort of a self-justification process, because he's using his own worldview as a standard to evaluate the rest of the world, right? And including everything into his own worldview. So it's an interesting way of
I call it
justifying
love, but
the
really
thing.
that's not even it.
True. Hey, well, welcome. It's justifying the way that he's viewing the world. So it's making it more strong. It's making the habit of viewing the world in the way that he views the world more strong, so that he can get into this mode of being where he's living out his life in a very conscious way that was deliberately formed by him. So it's something that we want to be aware of, and something that we want to try to utilize. Of course, there are dangers of this, because this can also happen with people who are, religious nuts or conspiracy theorists or any other type of number of things, or even, the scientific materialist type of people, where they're essentially trying to expand their thing. They have their worldview, and they try to analyze things that are outside of their worldview from within their worldview, and it justifies their worldview, right? But they don't have this they don't have the flexibility to want to expand their worldview to encompass all other things. They sort of want to solidify where it is and neglect other parts of the other worldviews or other aspects of the world that they don't quite understand. So, you do want to be careful when you get into this sort of loop of trying to evaluate everything from your own worldview to justify your own worldview, because it is a helpful way to get into a particular mode of being, but you could get into a restrictive mode of being, which may not be such a good thing, but, it's something to be aware of, and this is definitely what is happening with Leo. And it comes into this nonlinear payoffs, and eventually you have a very conscious way of being in the world. And that, well, it's extremely valuable, apparently.
But every episode that I was releasing in the early years,
glad you like the stream,
was not actually delivering on that result. You see, my early episodes were not very deep, were not very profound. I didn't even have the skills, the speaking skills, or even the intellectual skills developed yet to be able to talk about and interconnect all of the profound stuff that I talk about now. It took me a good 8 years to develop this capacity.
It's a long time. I'm very far. I'm very far from the level Leo's at, unfortunately. But, we all got to start somewhere, right?
And that is now something deeply valuable. To see, this is one of those things that's sort of abstract, but it's profoundly valuable that you cannot buy or get anywhere else. It's something truly unique that had to be built over a period of a decade.
Well, guess I gotta just keep making some videos, huh? That's my task for now. All right. So that's a little bit about what Leo's project is. We're going to skip a little bit more ahead, and we're going to still be talking about what Leo's developing, but a little bit beyond just the videos here. Let's see. So he's doing a lot to develop his videos and his way of speaking and interconnecting his videos to have a larger impact, but what exactly is that larger impact?
Related to that is another thing that I've been developing, which is even more important to me than my brand.
Okay.
And this business or this channel. Really, see what I've been doing.
Good morning.
I don't know if you realize this or not, but sort of the secret to what I've been doing over the last 10 or even longer, 20 years really, is that I've been developing one of the most robust and interconnected maps of reality that any human has ever developed.
Wow.
And I've been doing it inside my own mind.
Wow. You see, again, this is that expansiveness, right? He wants to include different worldviews, starting from somewhere, then including the philosophies and then all the different branches of philosophy, and then including spirituality and then all those different branches, and getting deeper into all of those different worldviews and including that into his model of reality, as he's calling it, model of reality. A very robust, interconnected model of reality. This is his most important thing. So hopefully we can help a little bit, right? Because we as an audience do encourage quite a bit in his comment section or in his forums, and you can help guide him and encourage him and, let him know what parts are very helpful, let him know which parts are not very helpful. You guys can do the same here if you like the video and there's something that you can add a little bit of extra nuance or a better perspective or, different perspective, let me know in the comments. Or if I've just got something wrong, let me know in the comments too, because that's going to help me with my worldview and help express it a little bit better. And, everybody gets a little bit of extra development from these different perspectives looking at these same things. So that's a very good thing here. But Leo's got this very wide worldview, and he wants to have the most robust, interconnected worldview. That's fascinating. And hopefully that works out. And it's interesting to see how that is happening and growing right now.
That means when I was reading a book, or when I was doing some philosophy, or when I was contemplating or meditating or whatever, taking a psychedelic, or watching a podcast, or watching an interview, or listening to some teacher, or going to some workshop, or whatever, reading a bit of self-help. All of those were little things I was doing, that could stand on their own, that could benefit me and improve my life a little bit. But really what I was doing is I was taking all those little pieces and I was combining them all together to figure out what the hell is going on in reality, making sense of everything. With the idea being that if I do this for 10 or to 20 years, I will have such a profound and deep understanding of how reality works that this will be like a superpower that I have that nobody else has. No scientist has this. No doctor has this. Even a lot of spiritual people don't have this. Because the way they do spirituality is not with that kind of intention. They're doing spirituality for some sort of shallow, singular goal. Like they want to feel happy, or they want to escape suffering or pain, or they want to just awaken and all they care about is just awakening and nothing else. Or they just want to be a Buddhist and they just follow the Buddhist path and nothing else. They only care about understanding Buddhism and nothing else. You see, this produces a very narrow understanding of reality. And it's not the same thing as what I'm talking about.
It's not the same thing, guys. We are not the same, right? This is extremely important. There's somewhere along the way, we've been talking about, spiritual people like the spirituality things, and they talk about how it's all holistic. It's a holistic worldview, and it includes everything. And people latched onto that, and I thought, okay, spirituality being holistic, it has the practical things, it's got the natural things, it's got the scientific worldview, and you've got all the different types of spiritual worldviews. But there are, oftentimes a lot of people then start to say that spirituality is the most important. And then they forget about the holistic part of it. They forget about the everything else there, as opposed to the narrow version of spirituality. Because they have this sort of idea that there's spirituality, there's, worldly things, and then all of them together are called spirituality because it's a holistic thing. But since we have a little bit of a linguistic confusion because the narrow thing and the holistic thing are using the same labels, a lot of people get caught up and they learn about some spiritual stuff and they think that just sitting down and meditating is all there is to the world. Maybe for some people that's an interesting way of doing the thing and living life, but that's not holistic. That's a very narrow sliver of reality. It's interesting, it's fine to develop, it's a good thing to develop, but that's not making an expansive view of reality, right? That's not doing what Leo is referring to here. It's not holistic. It's neglectful. And, well, I'm personally not a fan of neglecting other worldviews or other ways of engaging in the world. And how that translates for Leo is he likes to have his worldview expand and include all these other things. So we do want to be aware of that and maybe think about that in our own lives and see if there are places where we're neglecting forms of development or if we are open to seeing and developing all the different aspects of the world, the science, the philosophy, the spirituality, the relationships, the beauty, the art, blah, 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 everything. Holistic here. At least be open to developing those things and do not neglect them. That's what I would say.
So I've spent the last 10 years or more integrating literally hundreds of different perspectives, interconnecting them in my own mind, from scientists to New Agers to religious people to political ideologies and, social sciences, hard sciences, psychology, philosophy, non-duality, sociology, developmental psychology, spiral dynamics, chaos theory, fractals, quantum mechanics, evolutionary theory, interconnecting all that stuff.
Lots of fields.
And my hunch was behind all this that if I was able to integrate all this stuff together, that I would get something that's more than just the sum of its parts. It would be more than just having a PhD or a diploma. It would be more than just having a career as a scientist or as a philosopher. It would be more than just reading a list of books. It would be way more than all that. And that this would be extremely valuable. Both to me personally, just for living my own life in a better way, but it would be extremely valuable in sharing that with others like you. It would be worth millions of dollars. And so that's exactly what I've been doing over the last 10 years of my life. You see, rather than investing in Bitcoins, although I have a little bit of Bitcoins, full disclosure, but rather than, chasing after Bitcoins or chasing after stocks or chasing after money or chasing after podcast success or YouTube success, really what I've been doing is I've been investing.
Mm-hmm. Investing
in the most important and valuable thing that I have, which is building my mind. See, in this mind is literally contained one of the most sophisticated understandings of the entire universe that exists on this planet. Now, that might sound narcissistic and arrogant to say that, but I put it so starkly because that was my vision. I tend to have pretty high visions. When I do something, I can't really motivate myself to do it unless I think that it's really awesome to do. That means it has to be like a really awesome achievement.
Well, if he bumps his head and all the knowledge is gone, well, that's why he has all these videos, so it stays alive, at least as much as he's produced. Maybe he'll die before it's all out, but we'll get fragments.
It has to be something really amazing, rare, unique, and powerful. Otherwise, to me, it's not worth doing.
Mm-hmm.
And see, nobody in society will tell you that this is something you should be doing.
Of course not.
Or that this would be valuable to do. In fact, most people would tell you that this is foolish to do.
This is going to be very difficult, right? If you're engaging with most people, what a weasel word, right? But we'll just contrast it to different types of people. We have a person who has a vision of integrating many, many different types of worldviews, right? Expansive worldview, integrating science, philosophy, spirituality, psychology. He did the whole list. I don't have to do it again. It's expansive. But if you're talking to a normal individual person, they usually have one foundational worldview that is the one, and anything else deviating from that is not very important. I may call this something silly, like monomania. They have one worldview, and they think that is the only worldview, and it's the best worldview, and it doesn't need to change, it doesn't need to expand, it doesn't need to grow. This is a religious person who is stuck with dogma, right? This is the materialist atheist who doesn't see anything beyond physical matter. This is the very intellectual person who thinks it's stupid to talk to people or to interact with normal human beings, right? They're specifically neglecting most of the world and all these different types of worldviews to favor their own particular worldview. They're crazy people, stuck in one way of viewing the world. It's monomania. Okay, it's a silly way of putting it. But they're evaluating the world in a narrow way, and they're going to generally encourage you to not do what Leo's doing, not to try to integrate this sort of expansive worldview, because it doesn't seem valuable, right? Because value is defined, and it's going to be defined in some narrow way for a person who has monomania. It's going to be defined in some very, very narrow way. Does this give me some financial gain or something like that? Does this bring me more sex? One of the classic examples from Leo. This kind of thing is what these folks may be thinking about in terms of gaining value. But that's not what Leo's talking about, because the structure of value completely changes when you integrate multiple different worldviews. What value means changes. So it necessarily won't hold up to somebody who has a narrow vision of the world. who has a narrow worldview, and they only can evaluate the world through that one narrow lens, it necessarily won't hold up. So they're going to try to discourage that, generally. So that's kind of the, well, it's going to be a problem, sort of an issue. If you're trying to do this and you need encouragement, you're not going to get a lot of encouragement. We don't have lots of conscious communities who encourage this type of thing. Well, hopefully we can find it here. Hopefully we can find it in Leo's forums or whatever. And hopefully we can find other internet communities that are encouraging this sort of expansive exploration into many different fields and interconnecting and integrating all these things.
It's a waste of time.
Good way around zero-sum games. Yeah, absolutely. Because we all have different value systems, right? And we can all grow it in our different value systems, and then we can integrate them somehow. As long as we understand that other value systems are also valuable. Maybe value isn't the right word because value doesn't... We'll get more into value and how it's a strange word, but yes, this gets around our zero-sum games because we all see the world differently, and we can accept that and embrace that, hopefully, and encourage it, hopefully. And allow people to deepen their different ways of viewing the world and spread it, hopefully, so that we can all expand and grow as a community, hopefully.
And I've had a lot of people tell me to stop doing it. On a daily basis, people tell me to stop doing it.
Of course.
But that's what it takes to really accomplish something amazing in the world, is that you have to keep doing it despite all the naysayers. You keep doing it and doing it and doing it every single day, pushing towards your vision, because you feel that it's going to be something significant and something important. And you don't look to external validation to tell you that what you're doing is right.
Remember, okay, we're being consistent here. He's hammering this home. He wants consistency, daily practice, and now he's saying some sort of internal motivation because you're not going to get it externally. It's hard to find communities in that sense. So just highlighting, underlining, bolding the text here. He's making this very clear. This is what the video is about. And we want to make sure that we highlight this and understand it very well.
You have to look within. Your intuition, your higher self will tell you if what you're doing is right. And I'm not done with my project. There's still a lot more of this project going on. I still have a lot more to understand and to interconnect. And so my idea was that if I was going to interconnect more and more different perspectives, that eventually this would lead to something extraordinary. And you see, this is one of those things that is so abstract, like even to get this idea, imagine getting this idea in your mind, what I was just describing, and then to actually work on it every single day for 10 or 20 years. With no external validation.
Sounds tough.
That means you can't go to your parents and ask them, hey, should I do this? Is it a good idea? Because if you ask them, they'll tell you, no, it's stupid. That's what they'll tell you. So this requires a certain independence and a leadership quality to do this, and vision, and then patience, and then doing it every single day consistently, a little bit. And then telling yourself every single day that by doing this, you're working towards something important and not to quit. And that it's going to be worthwhile. Because you're going to have days where you're doubting yourself. You're going to have weeks where you want to quit. And just go follow all of your friends and do all the stupid stuff that they're doing. Or somebody's going to criticize you, or somebody's going to naysay you, and then you're going to take that criticism and injunction to quit you're going to let it get to you, and then you're going to want to quit. And you got to push past that and hold tight to your vision. See, this is what creates the most significant kinds of success in life. Your ability to do that. Now, I'm just giving you examples from my own life. I'm not saying you have to do this. I'm not saying this is what you need to be doing. Maybe you don't. Maybe you have the kind of mind that doesn't want this or doesn't need this, or maybe you have a different priority in your life. That's fine.
Remember, it seems like this person, Leo, does not have monomania, as I've been describing it earlier, right? He's accepting of other people having different value systems and different ways of viewing the world, right? So he's describing his and the project of expanding that. And you can start somewhere else and expand there. You can have your different priorities. You can have a different starting point because it's all accepting here. It's a lot more integrating and, well, not neglectful and not disparaging of different ways of viewing the world, though he does sometimes disparage other ways. But we'll forget that for a moment. You want to have this sort of accepting and growing mindset, integrating all aspects, all different worldviews. This is what we're coming from here.
Don't get hung up on the details. So one of the things that really juices me up and gets me, one of the secrets, I guess I could say, behind the passion that I have for life is that intuitively I'm always making these kinds of investments in my own self. And after years of doing this, it becomes very rewarding.
That's very cool, right? So you start to notice these investments and you start to do it, and that becomes one of the things that you've invested in, right? You do it consciously, and then there's somehow a switch at some point where that becomes your way of being in the world, where you're making investments naturally. You just naturally make these investments, and they're all these sort of non-linear type investments, as he's calling it. That just happens. So we're going to move on a little bit into getting into one of the particular examples of a type of investment that we maybe want to learn about and grow from and experience ourselves.
Of course, we're gonna get to spirituality here in a moment, but before we get to that, how about just something more simple like emotional mastery?
Emotional mastery. Okay.
Hopefully, you can intuit as early as possible in your life that emotional mastery, the development of emotional mastery, is going to pay dividends for the rest of your life if you can develop it. And the faster you can develop it, the better. But also, you should see that developing emotional mastery is difficult. You can't master your emotions overnight or even in a year. This requires a lot of deep introspection work, mindfulness work, dealing with your shadow stuff, dealing and facing fear and anger and jealousy, confronting these in an honest way, journaling about them, reading about how emotions work. This is a whole project.
It's a whole project, and you have to find all these different ways to feel your emotions and like give yourself actual permission to feel your emotions. A lot of the times we feel our emotions and then we get caught up in the resistance of thinking that we shouldn't be feeling a particular way, or what we don't like to feel a particular way, so on and so forth. So you got to find all these methods to give yourself permission to feel particular emotions. So you got to get into the habit of just kind of sitting with them. You got to get into the habit of journaling things and being a little bit more gentle with yourself. Blah 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 blah. I'm not going to have much to say more about the emotional mastery stuff. What he's saying is very good. We're not going to get too far into the details, but you do want to, it's going to take a long time to be able to accept your emotions, or just to feel it. The way that I would put it is just you need to feel your emotions without resisting them or without doing any other parts. Like there's no other thing to do. You just feel your emotion. And it takes a while to give ourselves permission to do that, or to get out the habit of all the things that distract us from just feeling our emotions, all the resistance and so on. So it takes a while. It's a good project to work on, though. And as he's saying, it's going to be very helpful if you do it at an early age. It pays off dividends to be able to process your emotions a little bit better and feel them more clearly, and not be driven by them so strongly and unconsciously. So very good stuff, emotional mastery, as he's calling it. But, I just like this, and not much to say more about it.
It can take you 10, 20 years of your life. Perhaps practicing different methods like the Sedona method, letting go of emotions. Just even learning how to label your emotions. For example, when you're angry, learning to label, oh, that's anger. And when you're afraid, oh, that's fear. And when you're jealous, oh, that's jealousy. And when you're feeling guilty, oh, that's guilt. And then you can research and learn different coping mechanism and different sorts of strategies for how to jujitsu with those different kinds of emotions. So like when you're angry, you can maybe learn the strategy of like, okay, let me just take a few deep breaths, pause and take a few deep breaths. Like that. Or maybe when you're afraid, you notice that your hands are tensing up and they're getting sweaty, or your leg muscles, your thigh muscles are tensing, or your gut is tensing. And maybe you even have a little bit of like irritable bowel syndrome from your fear, and then learning to let that go. You have to become mindful of it first, then you let it go. And maybe you learn some relaxation techniques. And then when you're sad or when you're depressed, learning some coping strategies for that. Like, what do you do when you're stuck in a depression, or you're stuck in a sort of a lazy, unmotivated state, and a sort of an apathetic state, or when you're feeling nihilistic and you feel like nothing matters and everything is meaningless, and maybe you even want to kill yourself? What do? See, most people have not developed any of this stuff. This is not taught to you in school, of course.
Of course. Unfortunate. And it's not even encouraged by friends and community.
And yet think of how valuable it would be if you actually developed this kind of emotional mastery. Or with being happy. See?
And the opposite, of course. Your emotional mastery is not just about controlling your negative emotions. It's also about really fully experiencing those good emotions. And boy, oh boy, am I a big fan of this one. Learning how to be happy, practicing being happy. I drink tea all the time in order to experience the beauty of tea and the joy of tea, and all these positive emotions and feelings. And so it's lovely. It's so good. And I like to appreciate art. And there's so many things that you can do to really develop this appreciation of the world and, very nice positive emotions. And again, these are things that you can develop. These are like really, really all the ways that you interact in the world are particular practices. And you can develop them consciously or you can develop them unconsciously. You're going to be doing it 24/7 anyway. It's going to happen naturally. So your choice, do it consciously, do it unconsciously. Pick the ones that you like the best or don't, and just let the ones that you don't like overtake you. You can make that decision. I like the good ones personally. I like this emotional mastery. It's a good idea, and the happy emotions are nice. And I'm drinking some tea right now. Well, I'm drinking water right now, but I'm drinking some nice water, and I haven't bought water in a long time. I haven't bought tea in a very long time, but I bought myself a spring water, a local spring water, and it turns out it's very, very good. So I'm enjoying that this morning. But it's the joy of drinking water. I've learning how to be happy and practicing that every day. Okay, sorry. Let's continue.
How do you be happy?
How?
Most people just are kind of winging it. They're doing stuff desperately to gain happiness, but it doesn't give them any happiness. All that happiness is fleeting, and yet they keep doing it over and over and again for the rest of their lives, and they're miserable and depressed when it doesn't work.
Very unfortunate.
So investing time researching what is happiness, and then learning how to make yourself happy and how to maybe enjoy, how to be satisfied, building up that muscle, as I've talked about in my satisfaction meditation episode. That would be part of emotional mastery. You see, all of this would take you years and decades to develop. Mm-hmm. And you would have to work on it yourself, of your own initiative, because nobody's going to do this for you. You can't outsource it. And if you haven't developed this in the early part of your life, it's going to get harder to develop it later in life, because you're going to build a lot of bad negative habits. You're going to build a lot of dysfunctional coping mechanisms for how to deal with your emotions.
So again, we talked earlier, he's going to be using a couple of fear tactics, and, I think I said a couple of things too that sounded a bit like that. But yeah, I mean, if you're waiting for a long time, you have developed a lot of habits, and you're going to have to first undo those habits before you can make up new habits and new ways of interacting in the world, and new valuable skills or new valuable worldviews to default to, and so on and so forth. Since you're developing all the time, if you start later in life, you've already developed quite a bit that you maybe have to undevelop, or maybe you're going to have to try to not be so caught up in as you're developing something new. So, something to be aware of. Time's a ticking, but no need to be too anxious about it or anything, but time is a ticking.
Then you're going to have double the work to unwire all those and then to wire in new ones in the future. So the earlier you do it, the better. And also, just it's going to pay dividends. You see, when you develop this emotional mastery, you're going to have the rest of your life to enjoy it.
Mm-hmm.
To enjoy a life that is not filled with a bunch of anxiety and panic attacks and fear and anger and jealousy and all this sorts of insecurity and victim mentality and bitterness and nihilism.
Okay, those are all the things that you could expect if you have a very limited range of practice. You have a very limited range of ways of interacting in the world. A very limited range of worldviews that you can pick from, we'll say. I don't know how to say it properly, okay? You have a limited way of viewing the world. You get all those bad stuff. So, try not to do that. Right? Try not to do that. All right, let's skip a little bit ahead. Learn about how he's defining a high-quality person. A person who's high quality. How does he define a person who's high quality? I guess we can all assume based on how he's been talking about it, but we want to give a more clear definition.
See, this is what determines the difference between a high-quality person and a low-quality person.
Okay.
A high-quality person is one who is going to work for the next 20 years to develop it and actually will develop it. And then
emotional mastery here.
That is what contributes to the quality of that person. Whereas the low-quality person is going to be lazy, is going to slack off, is not going to be consistent, is going to do it for one weekend and then is going to quit and go play video games and go jerk off and go smoke weed and go party with friends and go have a bunch of sex and do the easy life.
See that? So the high quality person is being a little bit more conscious and actually developing something over the 10s and 20s of years or however long. And the opposite would not be doing that. And I would also go on to say that the high quality person, while they're doing this sort of conscious development, they're also not neglecting or dismissing other forms of development, right? So the high quality person isn't like learning about emotional mastery and then looking down on people who are learning how to play tennis. Because other people may be doing other things, Some people may be athletes and learning physical mastery of their body, and you are doing your emotional mastery. And these are different things, and they're both valuable things, and you probably want to learn a little bit, maybe quite a bit from the physical mastery too. But I think that's a very important aspect of being the sort of high quality person here. You don't want to be neglecting or dismissive of other forms of development, but you do want to commit and actually put in the work for whatever development that you're doing personally. They're both important. So don't neglect, but do definitely work on what you're doing and develop that very well to the best of your abilities.
And then before you know it, 20, 30 years will pass in that person's life, and they will be 40 years old, 50 years old, and they will have nothing to show for it.
Basically, the personality traits of conscientiousness, and openness, aren't those opposites? When you put it that way, aren't they opposites? Am I misremembering these things? Are the people who are conscientious much less likely to be open? Uh-oh. Well, I guess he said it's a rare thing, and I guess this is why it's called a high-quality person. But yes, yeah, it seems like that. A person who's conscientious, who can have the sort of long-term, sort of sometimes seemingly tedious type of thing, but also open to different types of experience. They don't have to be. There's just a negative correlation. Okay. Well, there you go. 2 things to work on. Be more conscientious and also be more open to experiences. Very good. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. Definitely very good.
Because they've pissed away 40 years of their life
Uh-oh.
down the path of least resistance. And they've invested nothing in themselves, and they have nothing to show for it. They don't have a house. They don't have a savings account. They don't have emotional mastery. They don't have any spiritual development. They don't have any education. They don't have any brand that they've built, any business that they've built. They don't have any skills that they've built that are highly valuable. They don't have any artistic or creative skills. They don't have any business skills. They don't have any marketing skills. They don't have any speaking skills. They don't even have a sense of humor.
Right. This is the ultimate. This is, he's trying to drive us by fear here. So notice this. I'm not a big fan, again, of the fear thing. I'm not a big fan of the sort of validation by looking down on other people. But if this is effective for you, well, then be driven by it and certainly work on yourself and do some nice things. But we can look at the positives, or we can look at the potential negatives of not doing the positive things. I think that's the right way of saying it. So you do want to avoid not having anything to show for in the way that he's describing it here. I think most people do. And that's a possibility if you aren't actually consciously developing yourself for the valuable skills that are actually helpful for, as he's calling it, be successful in the world, but also just increase your well-being and, connectivity and flexibility and so on and so forth. All these different things that are helpful and good things. So we want to be aware of that and notice it. And, we've got a diversity of tactics here to drive you by encouragement and also drive you by fear. Maybe they work equal for some people and maybe they work differently for other people. But beware of both of them.
Because even something like a sense of humor is a great example of something that you have to build over years.
So there's another one. He's just giving another example here. And it's kind of a silly example. Like, again, most people just don't recognize this. Humor is something that you can develop and you can learn, right? And it's not just having humor. Like, you can be funny, but even to notice humor, to have a sense of humor, to have this sort of playful attitude in the world, or to find things funny, that's something you can develop too. And most people wouldn't think of these types of things as development, but every way of interacting in the world is a form of development. It's a practice that you develop. You can do it consciously, you can do it unconsciously. So humor is one of these things that Leo has done to develop consciously.
I've spent years developing a sense of humor. If you think I lack a sense of humor, you should have seen me 10 years ago before I started shooting these videos. How shy and how serious I was, how humorless I was.
Mm-hmm.
I had to spend a lot of effort to develop my sense of humor, and I had to practice it on a daily basis. Sometimes on my forum, you see me cracking jokes or being humorous. Even in serious situations, I'll sometimes crack a joke. And sometimes people wonder, oh, Leo's being an asshole. Why is he doing that? Actually, what you don't understand is that I'm actually practicing my sense of humor. Mm-hmm. Developing that. Because I know that by the time that I'm 50 years old, I want to have a really good sense of humor. And the only way I can get it is by practicing it for 10, 20 years.
How about that? He's practicing his sense of humor so that when he's 50, he can have a good sense of humor. Now, this is something he doesn't really get into, and I don't really have a very clear idea about this, but we all are people, and we all know old people, and I don't know about most of us, but most of us, I think, don't really hang out with old people. Maybe it's just me. I don't hang out with old people very much. Sometimes I hung out with my grandma last weekend. That was pretty nice. But I don't often just go out hanging out with old people. And we're all going to be old at some point, though. Do you have a plan for that? Does anybody think about what's going to happen there? Do you want to be an old person who doesn't have anybody to hang out with? All of your friends and your family are dead, and you just have no one to talk to or no one to be around? Do you have a way of trying to figure that out and how that's going to work out for you, or maybe ease that a little bit? Well, it seems like one of the things that Leo's doing is he's going to be funny. He's going to be funny at 50, And presumably he's going to be funny at 70 and 80 and 90. And maybe as a funny 90-year-old, people are going to be wanting to be around him and wanting to get some, of course, of the advice and the worldview that he has developed over the time. And, that's kind of interesting, I think. And it's just something I think about occasionally, but not very often, but occasionally. And something we can all wonder because we all are, we're going to be old at some point. So what's the plan? Something rubs me the wrong way from Geist here about taking these areas of life as a serious object of perpetual self-improvement. I think I agree with that partially. It depends on what serious means in that statement, and also perpetual self-improvement. There are a lot of these words kind of sound bad in the way that you're framing it. But I think you can take something seriously without having like a stick up your butt. And you can do like self-improvement without being neurotic. So I feel like there are mature ways of going about this sort of taking things seriously and trying to improve, every little aspect of your life. But I can also very easily see how that can go off the rails and be very toxic and very immature way of interacting in the world, and dangerous. So definitely good to counter signal that a little bit and make sure that we're aware of trying to improve everything with this super seriously, and we don't want to take ourselves too seriously, essentially. The simplest way of putting it. You don't want to take yourself too seriously because, well, then nothing's going to be fun and everything's going to suck. And that sucks. It sucks to suck. So don't do that. Yeah, good point.
Every chance that I can get. So if I see a chance to crack a joke, I'll take it. Now, I'm not saying I have an amazing sense of humor. I'm saying it's not about how good you are in some absolute sense. It's always relative to where you were in the past. Right? So where I am today is 1,000% better than where I was 10 years ago.
And think about that. That's so good because you're not trying to compare yourself to professionals, right? You're not trying to compare yourself to the best of the best, right? You're just improving. The activity is to develop, and you're just developing. And essentially, you're developing the habit of developing. So you don't really need to be, he's saying 1,000 times better, and that's pretty good, but you don't need to be 1,000 times better. You just be a little bit better because the process of developing, you develop the process of developing, and then you start to develop everything, and eventually you get into that habit, and where you're, as he was saying earlier, you're by intuition looking for every form of development that gives this sort of nonlinear payoff, and you're working towards it, and you're investing towards it intuitively. So just develop something, and that'll get you into the habit of developing things. And that's all you really need. You start to develop, and there you go, off for the races. You don't need to be compared to a professional. You don't need to compare yourself to yourself, even so strongly by saying that he's 1,000 times better. It's not so important. All that's important here is that there's a raw development, any sort of development. That's all that matters. Conscious development.
I'm not comparing myself to stand-up comedians. I'm comparing myself to where I was and also to where I want to be. And my journey's not done. There's still a lot of work I can do on my sense of humor. You see, but a lot of people, they take this approach of like, well, Leo, how do I become humorous? By the way, I have a video.
Okay, he's got a video about being humorous, okay? All right, we figured it out. There we go, okay. That's him. He's telling us about humor. He's got a whole video about it. We're going to skip a little bit, okay? Let's get a little bit further. We're going directly into the spiritual stuff. All right, we got all the funny, weird examples. Got all the kind of interesting examples. Let's go into spirituality. Here we go.
Of course, we should now talk about the example of spiritual work.
Okay.
So, all of the biggest fruits of spiritual practice, such as enlightenment, awakening, or even just happiness, or a sense of liberation and freedom, or a sense of peace and tranquility, or maybe some emotional mastery that comes along with it as well, or shedding your suffering and your depression and your anxiety and your self-hatred and what other demons you have. Getting rid of your shadow, becoming more loving, accessing infinite love.
Ooh, infinite love.
Accessing God, accessing higher intelligence, accessing profound wisdom from the universe that you couldn't access otherwise. Or even spiritual powers like cities, classic cities, yogic powers that could be developed. Even things like telepathy, clairvoyance, and so on, that many materialists don't even believe are possible.
Of course.
Healing powers and so forth. See, these are all the fruits of spiritual work that everybody would love to have immediately. Like if I published a course tomorrow that said how to have cities in one weekend, how to develop clairvoyance and omniscience and telepathy and all this in one weekend, or how to access infinite love in one weekend. I could sell 1 million copies of this course tomorrow. Everybody wants that. But of course, I'm not going to create a course like that because developing these powers and so forth and accessing these fruits of spiritual work, this takes decades of patient, consistent daily practice and self-investment rather than some sort of weekend course. If you're sitting there thinking like, oh man, but Leo, can't you release a course like that? I would love that. Tell me how to get these fruits from spiritual practice. Well, but that's what actualize.org is. Actualize.org is that. The problem is that this is such a deep domain of work. It's so broad and deep simultaneously that you don't even realize that all these episodes that I'm releasing are helping to guide you towards that. And that if you actually would do the fucking work, you'd maybe experience some of the fruits. See, are you willing to sit and meditate every single day for an hour or two for the next 10 years to develop some of these fruits?
Are you?
Most of you aren't, which is why you'll never get the fruits. Which is why you keep watching my videos and you get no results. And you'll keep getting no results until you wise up and actually discipline yourself to do the practices that I have talked about many, many times that you stubbornly refuse to do because you're lazy and you just want the result and you don't want to work for it. What does accessing infinite love, what is that worth to you? Is it worth $5 million? What does becoming conscious of God, what is that worth to you? How about understanding the entire origin of existence? What is that worth to you? To most people, these things are worth nothing. And therefore, they're not willing to even expend a weekend working towards it.
It's very difficult too because it is worth nothing from their perspective, of course. They have a more narrow, a different, maybe it doesn't need to have to, in this case, it doesn't even have to be narrow range. If somebody has a very narrow range or a range of worldviews that does not include any of the spiritual worldviews, well, all those things are going to be worthless because they don't give you any of the benefits of the worldviews that they're referring to, right? It's like if you're a religious person, what is it like? I don't know what this is like. We have all these different structures of value, and unfortunately, oftentimes we put all of the values and try to fit it into a structure of financial value, which is kind of unfortunate, right? So we have things that are good, morally good. We have things that are aesthetically beautiful. We have things that are epistemologically true, epistemically true, I think. We have, this sort of the three sort of main values in terms of our natural philosophy, or not natural, but our philosophical understanding of things: good, true, beautiful, right? Um, but then we think about value in terms of financial value, and we try to think about the structure of financial value. With financial value, you have things that are quantifiable, we have things that are comparable, and we have things that are very easily transferable, and we have ways of very, very simple ways of evaluating the value. Just a number value. It's the amount of money that you have is the value. And if you have a certain amount of money and something costs a certain amount of money, well, you can buy that thing, you can trade it. It's very, very simple. But that doesn't quite follow for all different types of values, right? You have good things. Well, let's say you have true things. You have something, a true statement. But not in all forms of, let's say, in all forms of epistemology. I don't want to get too far into philosophy because I don't know a lot about it, but true is just true. It's not like levels of true. It's not like you have something that's true and then you have something that's more true, then you have something that's more and more true, and you can trade one true thing for another true thing. Right? That's not how that works. The same for beauty. It's not like one thing is beautiful and then something is more beautiful. You don't compare these things. You don't need to compare these things. They're not comparable. They're all beautiful. They're all true. True things are true. False things are false. Not more false, not less false. It's just false. True things are true. False things are false. Good things are good. Bad things are bad. And you can get, a little bit, sometimes a little bit more into, goodness. You can get to complicated scenarios where you have a little bit fleshed out worldview. You have like gradients of more good or less good or neutral and so on. But the precision and the sort of comparative nature of things it's not natural for those other types of value structures. So even this type of analogy of trying to figure out what it's worth to you, it's just sparking this type of value structure that people have built up that's more aligned with the sort of financial values, where things are very easily traded, things are very simply quantified, and things are very easily comparable. And that just doesn't follow for most values or these other types of values generally. So, I guess it's not really a fully formed thought here, but it's kind of an unfortunate thing that it continues to be encouraged, and to even ask the question, what is it worth to you, sort of strengthens that habit for people to try to put a financial value onto it. But of course, Leo tries to put a very large financial value onto it to sort of overload it. I'm not sure if that's actually effective, but different ways of going on here. Leo is expressing infinite love in the God mind, and he's saying he's no different from one of his listeners drinking a beer while listening to his content and thinking about tomorrow's football game in value. Well, it's a different type of value, right? So the accessing infinite love and God mind is of a spiritual value, right? And drinking beer and hanging out with your friends, or drinking beer and listening to content, is like a different value. It's a sensual value, and you can't compare cross value, right? How do I compare? If something is true, do I compare that to something that's beautiful? They're different values. They're different value structure. I can't even compare beautiful things to other beautiful things, right? That's difficult in itself. It's difficult to compare true things to other true things. But how do you compare like the value of a true thing to a beautiful thing? That doesn't make any sense. So in this sense, like, how do you compare like a spiritual value to a sensual value? They're both doing the best that they can in a given moment. Yeah, that's one way of viewing the world, and that's certainly a good thing, that if both people are just doing their best, and that's one value, right? That's one value. And that's a good thing. People are just doing their best in that very moment. It's a tricky thing, I guess. I don't know a lot about the philosophy of values, and I don't have a very strong language for describing how different value structures are not comparable to other things, and how it seems that we're porting over the structure of financial value and imposing it onto, the values of beauty or spiritual values, or morality values, and so on and so forth. But I haven't really fully formed it out in my thoughts here, but that's just a little bit something there. Sparked by this, let's continue.
So then, is it a wonder that most people are spiritually bankrupt in our society? They are. Just like most people cannot invest 10 years building a brand in their business. They cannot discipline themselves or motivate themselves to spend 10 years building up their spiritual bank account. Mm-hmm. They're bankrupt. And then they want some quick solution, like how to be happy, how to find love, how to have a bunch of sex, how to be attractive, how to be masculine, how to get your health back. All of these things you can do, but these require serious long-term investment in yourself. There are no quick solutions for these things. Those things that have quick solutions, those solutions are already generally well known, and you can buy them, and you already have bought them. Mm-hmm. The most valuable stuff is the stuff that people haven't invented a mechanical solution for. There's no technology or gadget that will do this thing for you. You have to build it manually. That's precisely why it's worth so much. Because if you could just push a button and it would be solved in a weekend, it wouldn't be worth anything. And you would already have that. If there was some button you could push or some course you could take that would make you happy in one weekend, everybody would push that button and buy that course. And everybody would be happy already. You see? And if there was some button you could push that would make you enlightened, everybody in the world would already be enlightened. And if there was some video that I could release that would make you experience infinite love, then everybody in the world would already be filled with infinite love. And there would be no problems in the world. There would only be infinite love.
Wouldn't that be nice?
So you have to be wise enough to see that what you really want in your life is always going to be walled off from you by your own willingness to exert the labor to get it.
And I think the reason why we don't have this sort of willingness is because we have a particular value structure. We have a particular way of viewing the world already. And it necessarily doesn't accept things outside of it, generally. I said necessarily, then I said generally, whatever. Right? You have a way of viewing the world, you have a way of evaluating, and if you're only looking for financial value, you're not going to be able to evaluate spiritual value. You're not going to be able to evaluate moral value. You're not going to be able to evaluate aesthetic value. You're not going to be able to evaluate epistemic value. Right? You can't do that from financial value. It just doesn't work. So you're going to have this such narrow worldview. It's not such narrow, but you're going to have this narrow worldview that doesn't know how to evaluate in other value systems. So you necessarily won't have any sort of motivation to go outside of that and develop other forms and other worldviews that have differing value structures. It'd be nearly impossible. You may need a divine intervention or something ridiculous like that to help jump jump you into a different worldview and a different system of seeing the world and grow and expand. So that's the predicament that most of us are in.
And so when you realize that, then you can actually get excited about doing labor. Because you realize that, in a certain sense, the more labor you put into something, you can almost get excited about it. Because the more you invest, the more you realize you're going to get back. Now, of course, you want to be smart about this. You don't want to be investing labor into some dead-end pursuit, thinking that it's going to pay off. You got to be investing in the right things. There are some things you can be investing in that will never pay off for you. And in fact, it'll backfire. Uh-oh. So you got to be investing in the right things. But as long as you're investing in the right things in a smart way and you're doing it effectively, then you can get excited about the fact that you're investing in it. Like, for example, lately I've restarted my yoga practice. And with my yoga practice, I'm getting more mature and I'm seeing the value of the practice more and more as I develop myself. And like I'm more excited now than ever about doing my yoga practice because I realize that every hour I put into it, that is directly investing into my own consciousness a little bit, nice. Drop by drop by drop every single day. And it doesn't seem like a lot, a drop, imagine sort of an eyedropper. And you're dropping one little drop into a giant bathtub. It's an empty bathtub. And you're just walking in every single day and you're going drop, and then you're walking away. And then the next morning you're walking in there and going drop, and then you're walking away. And you're doing that every single day. Only one drop. See, most people would get very discouraged about this because they would see, they would look at the bathtub, they would look how big it is, they would look at the little drop, they'd see how small it is, and they'd say, oh, this is hopeless, this is impossible.
It's impossible. It's going to evaporate away, bro. How do we do this?
But to me, this can kind of be reframed. I like to reframe this in my mind to say, this is actually amazing because I know that everybody else is going to be discouraged by this process and is going to quit. And all I have to do is just keep doing drop by drop by drop by drop by drop every single day. And in 10 years, I'm going to be the only person with a full bathtub.
So, I hope we don't keep, Leo's Leo. He's got his way of doing things. So this comes out quite a lot, this sort of competitive mindset of comparing himself to others. I don't personally like that. I don't want to encourage it very much, but just be aware of that, how that's happening. And your measure of success or value is not just being better than other people. And maybe being driven by envy or just kind of, wanting to have something that other people have. Maybe that's not the most healthy way of going about things. Maybe. But of course, it can be encouraging for some people. So if it's encouraging for you, okay, go do the eyedropper thing, work on yourself. But hopefully at the end of that, you're not going to be looking down at other people who haven't done the same conscious work. Because it's not cool to look down on people, I guess. It's an easy way of putting it. So I don't want to encourage that very much. But, that's what we're getting from Leo at the moment. And let's understand that and see it.
And then people will wonder, how did your bathtub get full? What's the secret? Tell me the secret. How can I fill up my bathtub in one weekend? Well, you can't. Because all you have to work with is this little eyedropper. Mm-hmm. See, the human mind is a very stubborn beast. It takes years and decades to rewire your mind, how it works, its belief structures, and so forth.
Right. This is exactly what we're talking about. How do you change and develop things? And the valuable things take a long time to develop. Right. You have a particular way of viewing the world. How do you develop something that's bigger? How do you develop something that's slightly different? It's difficult to do. It takes a while. And we're going to jump a little bit because we're going to talk about how small these effects are. He's talking about the eyedropper here. We talk about how small the effects are and when we become sensitive enough to notice it. Let's jump a bit.
Most people, when they sit down to meditate, they're not sensitive enough to really feel the change that this makes. There's a change that it makes on a temporary basis, like on your temporary state for the next hour or for the next day.
Feels nice.
That's irrelevant. That comes and goes. But there's also a secondary change it makes at a deeper structural level of your mind where it purifies your mind a little bit, but only a tiny bit. Like every hour you meditate effectively, maybe it purifies your mind by 0.00001%. It's virtually imperceptible. It's like a little drop in the bathtub.
Such a small, minuscule, tiny, inty-weensy, little bitty effect here. And I like the way that he's framing it here. I also like to frame it sometimes in an opposite way, where you have a very, very strong effect, but you don't remember it. So the process would be to work on your memory. And I kind of make an analogy to dreams, right? Most people dream every single night. I can probably guarantee it that you're dreaming every night. Probably guaranteeing that, probably. Most people are dreaming every single night, but they don't remember it. And you don't have to do anything to have dreams. You don't have to like work to have dreams. You have to work to remember your dreams, and that's it. And it's the same for this meditation sort of, and some sort of other spiritual nonsense. You know, this is one way of framing it. You sit down to meditate, you get all the benefits. You see infinite love, you mingle with God, or whatever nonsense you like to say, and it's beautiful and it's lovely. And then the next moment you completely forget it. And the activity is not to feel infinite love. You're already doing that. The activity is to remember it. But anyway, that's just a slightly alternative framing here. In either sense, you're not sensitive enough to notice it. You're either not sensitive enough to notice the very small effects, or you're not sensitive enough to remember the very big effects. You want to increase your sensitivity. And that's going to be the practice for the however many years it takes for you to practice and notice these things.
And so it's easy to discount the value of that. We want some kind of magic pill that will give us like a 10% increase or a 20% increase in our consciousness or in our love or in our sense of humor or in our business. But usually that's not possible, let alone a 200% increase. You know, that's how these get-rich-quick schemes, they fool you. And even a lot of self-help teachers and seminars, they will fool you telling you, like, come to this workshop and we will teach you how to fix your marriage in a weekend, or how to rid yourself of insecurity and social anxiety in a single weekend, or take this course and this will solve for you all your money problems, or all of your problems with attracting women. And of course, none of these can deliver.
It's impossible because you have to work for a very long term to get the fruits of any of this stuff. One weekend ain't going to cut it. But unfortunately, you ain't buying those books that tell you to work for hours and hours and hours. All right, we're jumping ahead a little bit more and learning about the relative maturity that is necessary for spiritual work over other types of development.
So when it comes to spiritual work, this is where you require the most patience and the most maturity and the most strategic approach. And this is why most people have never felt the fruits of spiritual work. They don't even believe there are the fruits. Like many of the fruits that I talk about or promise, people will say that I'm crazy or that I'm a cult leader or that I'm imagining things or that I'm delusional to promise these fruits, because these people have never, they can't, their worldview is so limited, they can't even imagine the possibility of these fruits.
It's so outside of their worldview, and they have monomania. These folks are crazy, and they have one way of viewing the world, and they can't imagine what it's like to evaluate outside of their narrow framework. Unfortunate.
Let alone, never mind actually working towards them for years. spiritual practice is some of the most challenging work that you can do. It's the deepest kind of investment you can make in yourself. And it needs to be done really over a period of decades.
And again, we have to be a little bit careful here, because he's saying again that spiritual work is the most important thing. But then earlier we kind of talked a little bit about how there are some people who care about spiritual work to the neglect of other things, to the detriment of their physical health or to the detriment of their financial or whatever, worldly success. They care about one thing over the other thing. And that's fine to care about one thing over the other, but there's some people who like to disparage the worldly things, and they disparage and neglect development in those fields in order to develop their spirituality. And that's no bueno. That's no bueno. You still need to have that openness. You don't need to, but it's cool to have that openness. To be a high quality person, as Leo is referring to here, you need that openness to not neglect and not disparage and not dismiss other ways of interacting in the world. You can do your thing, but you don't need to look down on other people who are developing different things. So we just want to be careful a little bit here when we say that spirituality is the most important thing or the most mature thing. I can't actually remember what he said. The most important thing for us to develop. In some sense it is, but we don't want to accidentally make it seem like other things are not important, because it's not the case.
You need to have a very patient attitude, a very long time horizon, a very deep vision to access these fruits for most people. Some people are more spiritually gifted, they can do it faster. But for the majority of people who are not especially spiritually gifted, it'll take years and decades. Now you might say that's so negative and depressing. Actually, no. I'm delivering to you a very positive message. Is that in 10 years' time, you can experience incredible fruits in your life. 10 years is not that long.
True.
10 years of your life will pass so quickly. And one of the most depressing things that will happen to you is if you let the next 10 years pass without making any investment. And then 10 years will pass, and then you'll realize what I told you 10 years from now on your 40th birthday or 50th birthday. You'll realize what I'm telling you here, and you'll say, oh, fuck. How I wish that I listened to Leo and actually disciplined myself when I was in my 20s and in my 30s and in my early 40s.
More of that driving from fear, right? He wants you to be afraid of a particular way of existing in the world in the future and try to drive away from that. As opposed to being driven by love. I don't like this sort of driving by fear, but we can notice it and may be very effective for you. If it is effective, please let it be very effective, and work on these things
to make these investments. Because now I would be living the high life. I would be coasting off the dividends. I would be living off the dividends. I could do a sort of early retirement, early spiritual retirement, rather than slaving away at this stuff when I'm in my 50s and 60s and I'm getting close to the end. Life really is about investing in yourself very deeply as early as possible and doing it as much as humanly possible. Every single day. This is what it takes to build a great life. Really, you should have been doing it from age 5. Sometimes people ask me, Leo, I'm 15 years old or I'm 20 years old. Is the stuff that you talk about suitable for me, or am I too young? And my answer, in my mind, the answer is always, you're not too young, you're too old.
So Let's think about this, right? He says you want to start when you're 5. And we can imagine, like most people, I'm imagining most people who are watching this video are literate. You can read. And for most of us, it's impossible to not read, right? If you were to be presented with words, text on a screen or text on a page or text anywhere, you read it. You almost can't not read it. You can't not, I mean, you can't just look at text and not understand it. It's very difficult to do. Also difficult for speaking, right? I'm speaking things, and it's difficult for you to hear it and not understand it. That's a very difficult task for most people because they've trained their literacy at such an early age. It's something that's impossible to not do. And literacy is not some sort of natural thing for species or humans or anybody. It's not like something that just is innate and that is necessary to be this natural thing. No, there are a lot of people out there who can't read. There are a lot of people out there who do look at symbols and don't understand it. But for most of us, we've been a little bit educated, from the age of 5 or younger. And whenever we see text, we have to read. We're compelled to read it. We don't have to, but it's the sort of, it's our habit to read it. It's instinctual. I don't think that's the right word, but it just happens. And it's instantaneous. How about that? Imagine if we were in a scenario where from the age of 5, whenever we were presented with any experience, any sensory experience, we also interpreted that as infinite love, and we felt that infinite love. We had that, we gleamed the deeper spiritual meaning of it. Yeah. Every single time we were presented with any experience. Imagine that, right? Because now anytime you're exposed to text, you get the meaning from the text. You read it. If you were trained from the age of 5 every day, with the help of a community, to learn how to read, to learn how to, develop your spirituality, to develop this understanding and this feeling of infinite love when exposed to any experience, it will be something that you couldn't turn off. Be something that would be natural. Be something that would be instantaneous. It'd feel like it's instinctual. It'd feel like it's necessary for your life. But unfortunately, we don't have this set up. Currently, this is not exactly how we generally live our lives, but we can notice that this is something that we can develop over time. So we get to this point where we just naturally either pay attention to something, so you can be mindful in this sort of normal way where your natural inclination is to pay attention to things, not be distracted. Or if you want to go farther into this sort of, infinite love realization or infinite beauty realization, and anything that you're presented with feels beautiful or feels loving, you can train that and make it so that it's instantaneous and make it so that it's pervasive, natural, always occurring. I don't know what the right words are, but I think we get the picture here. Wouldn't that be nice? And imagine if you did it from the age of 5. But still, you can learn how to read after 5, and you can learn how to do this after 5 too. You can start whenever, start wherever you are, and eventually that can become a habit. And there you go. You're off to the races of enjoying the great fruits of spirituality.
If you're 15, you already missed 10 years of doing this. You already wasted 10 years of your life. If you're 20, you already wasted 15 years of your life.
Okay. You can start anywhere. Okay, we don't want to drive by fear. All right, you didn't waste any of your life, all right? But that's one way of putting it. You got different ways of putting it, okay?
You could basically be like a spiritual master by the age of 20. Mm-hmm. If you start at 5, if you start meditating at 5 every single day for an hour, you would be an enlightened master by the age of 20. But in our society, in our culture, people are so lazy and complacent these days that they don't even really begin serious development until like age 25 or 30. People piss away 30 years of their life
Don't laugh.
And
man.
then they come to me and they're sort of like wondering, Leo, how do I fix all these problems? Please help me. I'm so desperate.
Help?
It's too late. I mean, like, it's not too late, but I mean, like, you already pissed away the prime of your life. Now, I'm not saying you shouldn't now invest. Don't make a limiting belief out of this and don't get depressed about this. Even if you're 50 or 60 years old and you just stumbled upon this content and you feel like you've wasted 60 years of your life, okay, fine. You can still, I mean, what else is there to do?
Yeah. You start where you are, man. The journey of 1,000 miles begins with the first step, all right? You start where you are and you'll get there eventually.
Do the work. It's like I said, it's better later than never. But are you going to have some regrets about wasting a bunch of your life? Yeah, you will. Because you did.
Yeah, you'll have regrets before you finish. But once you get that sweet, sweet benefit, once you actually bask in the infinite love or whatever it is, spiritual, something that you want, you won't have any regrets, all right? When you're successful, when you're spiritually successful, you won't have any regrets. So nothing to worry about there. But maybe in the interim, maybe on your way there, maybe you'll have some regrets.
And so that's going to be something you have to work through.
Mm-hmm.
So don't be that way. Most of you who watch me are pretty young.
I don't think there are any 5-year-olds.
I know a few of you are older, and I have sympathy for you. It's not easy doing this work if you're starting in your 50s and 60s. Believe me, I sympathize with you. Personally, I started this work young, and I'm very grateful for that.
All right, he's going to go into him and how his schooling and how he started with philosophy at a young age, and it's interesting, I guess, but not so important. Not much I could say about it. We're going to skip a little bit. We're closing into the end. We're going to skip a bit to, I think we'll include this. Yeah, we can include it. All right, we'll include it. He's just going to talk a little bit about the value of this video. Let's go into it. I think we're here.
Happening simultaneously for me.
Here.
Like when I'm recording this video, a couple of things are happening simultaneously for me. And I've sort of designed it this way. It's a great synergy.
Okay.
First of all, I'm releasing this video. It's going to get monetized and it's going to earn me some money. That's nice. It's always nice to get some money from your work. Mm-hmm. But that's not the biggest benefit I get from it. But still, if this video sits on YouTube for the next 20 years, it'll earn tens of thousands of dollars for me, just this one video. So that's pretty nice. That means that this hour and a half that I've invested up to this point to be talking about this is going to get rewarded with thousands of dollars. So that's pretty nice.
Pretty good.
But also it's going to help many people out there. It's going to help tens of thousands of people to figure out their life. And it's going to add to them building a better life for themselves. And ultimately, some people from this video, from taking this advice, will become millionaires. A few will become billionaires, over the next 20 years. We're talking really big picture. Some people will become enlightened. Some people will experience infinite love. Some people will discover God. Some people will find their dream, partner. Some people will fix their health problems. So a lot of good will be done for society. So that's great from my point of view, building a better world. But also, as I'm talking, I'm practicing and developing my speaking skills. So that's good because that's going to synergize with the next episode. And the next episode, I do 100 more of these. My speaking skills will double, triple over the next 10 years. That will make me a powerful public speaker in the future. That will be very valuable because then I can use that to influence people and make the world even better. And I can also enjoy, the better my speaking skills become, the more enjoyable it is. You see, after 10 years of speaking on camera, not 10, but 8 years of speaking on camera, doing what I'm doing now is the most fun part of my day. It seems like I'm up here working really hard. No, this last hour and a half that I've been talking, in my mind, it seemed like 5 minutes. It's nothing. It's so easy. What I'm doing right here is so effortless. That's what's beautiful about it. On the one hand, it's very profound insight. On the other hand, it's the most effortless part of my day. This is the easiest part of my day, is sitting in front of the camera and talking.
So again, that's really nice, right? He's developed that habit of doing it. He's been doing it for many years. He's doing it weekly for many years. And now it's just kind of a natural thing. It just kind of flows for him, I guess. Something that he likes to do. And it's easy. Easy.
That's what happens when you develop high skill in something and you're relatively proficient with it and you're strong in that area. It also happens to be a strength of mine. Mm-hmm. So, you're building on your strengths. You want to align what you're doing. You want to align the skills you're building with your strengths, not with your weaknesses. So that's happening. Also, as I'm speaking, I'm hearing myself speak and I'm refining my own internal models of understanding of reality. So every video I shoot helps me to understand myself and my own models better.
So that's a very good thing to mention about just theory at all, right? He's creating a model of reality, and he could just have it in his head, or you could just practice this theory without actually, formulating it into any sort of structure, or without actually trying to write it down, or without actually trying to present it in any way. But that you kind of lose a little bit if you don't write down your theory or refine your theory. So now he has it distilled into some videos, which he can see which parts are most effective in terms of communicating to other people, and then which are most accurate in terms of adding precision to his understanding of the world and to his actual practice. So it's a good thing, and it's refining his worldview and refining the way that he interacts in the world. So it adds to his communication, and it's a very cool thing. So I want to note the importance of that. It's pretty nice.
I also get feedback from people once they post their comments and stuff. That also helps me to kind of correct my models and adjust them and polish them up.
Which is very good, right? We get a little bit of the community to help guide him into a better direction, or to the more mature direction, or some extra form of development when you have multiple perspectives to zero in on something. So, yeah, that's pretty cool for him, and it's also cool for me. So if there's anything that you've liked in the video, give me a like and subscribe, and also comment below anything that really resonated with you, or if there's something that you feel like you can add a little bit of extra nuance and different perspectives to. I'd love to hear it. Or if there's just something I've been saying that's off the mark completely, give me some corrections. Help me out. It's helping for everybody to grow their models of the world, and then as their model grows, they can put into practice a lot better. So it's pretty cool.
And ultimately, that all contributes. Every episode I shoot, really, even though it helps you, it helps me even more, because it helps me to build up my model. And my model is the most valuable thing that I have in my life. And then this model that I build over the next 10, 20 years is going to become so amazing that then I'll write books based upon it, hopefully, once I get to that point. I already am writing some stuff, but it's really difficult to write it all down because it's so vast and deep and complex. But eventually I'll get it into book form.
Yeah, no worries. So you have these complicated things. Well, for any sort of writing, you kind of want to write it out. Just write everything you can, and you can do your organization later. These are different modes. These are different functions of the mind. So one function, you will be sort of creative and just putting a lot of stuff out there. And then the other function will be more organizing and cutting out stuff that didn't really fit and maybe refining it a little bit. So, give him a lot of time to just throw a lot of all of his ideas on paper, and then maybe another era where he'll be organizing a little bit more.
And I'll use it to make even deeper videos, and I'll use it to make even deeper talks. And so that becomes very rewarding to me. So see, when all of these things synergize in this way, that's when you get the most meaning out of life and out of your work. Mm-hmm. So try to set your life up that way. Like, for example, most people, when they listen to a podcast or an audiobook. To them, it's just like a one-off thing. Okay, I've listened to it. Oh, kind of nice. Okay. And then they just kind of move on. And it's disconnected from everything else that's going on in their life. For me, if I listen to a podcast or read a book, to me, that's going into my model. That's adding to my model. That's refining my model. So it has much more significance than it would to an ordinary person.
Having everything be interconnected in that way. So it just compounds the value of every type of interaction that you have in the world. So he's just gathering information and he's like, oh, that can be included in my model. Very good. Compounding the value there. I like it.
Also, it helps me to then deepen my videos, deepen my work.
And then he can get a lot more precise and more depth into all of his works because he's learning from other people. And other people have different levels of precision in different fields, right? He may have a precise understanding in spirituality while other person has a precise understanding of science. And, you have to learn from the other people who have done the work in terms of science and integrate that into his system. So very cool. Very, very cool.
It helps me to help a lot of other people.
Helps to help. Okay. So that's the value that he gets from all these videos. And we're going to jump a bit towards the end. It's not exactly the end. That's the end before the end. He does this all the time. Oh. I'm having trouble scrolling here. Okay.
Before
no.
I knew about
Oh,
Bezier
no.
curves and splines, my idea of a curve was very basic.
Everything's
It
falling
was
apart.
either the classic
Okay, that's not what we're watching. We're watching
And to
this.
figure out-
Here we go. Okay, here we go. Here we go. We're signing off now.
So I hope this talk has sobered you a bit and has gotten you to appreciate the importance of investing deeply and patiently into yourself. Now your job is to figure out exactly what those investments should be, and then, of course, to follow through on that. It's not enough to listen to this. You got to follow through on it.
Okay, so here we go. We're just giving us the wrap up here, making sure we have good expectations and a little bit better guidance because we have this better expectations. Right? We got to work on things. It's going to take a long time to work on them, but the fruits come after a long period. Good fruits, big fruits, but it takes a while.
All right, that's it. I'm done here. Please click that like button for me and come check out actualize.org. That is my website. That is my brand. On there, you will find the book list.
Okay, you've seen this in credits before many times, right? He's got a book list. He's got life purpose. He's got a forum. He's got a clips channel. He's got other things, all right? Check out his stuff. It's nice. All right, but then for some reason, there's a post credits. There's a post credit scene, so we're going to go to the post credits, which is also, it's nice and it's worth watching. So we're going to jump to that. Here we go.
That makes
Uh-oh. Here we go.
it a little bit easier to digest and to share.
Clips.
And to
Patreon.
review. I want to warn you that every teacher that you study under, whether it's me or anybody else, is going to have biases.
Okay, so this is extremely, extremely important. I don't know why he put this in the post credits. I don't know why he signed off the video before he said this. But no matter. He's saying it, and we are, we're the deep divers, right? We're the fans who go all the way through this and take notes and make sure we understand deeply exactly where he's emphasizing things and so on and so forth. At the end credits here, he's saying that teachers have bias. All teachers have bias. And we want to notice this. And we don't want to, well, he's going to get into it, we don't want to repeat teachers' biases. We don't want to copy other teachers and copy their biases. You need multiple perspectives to erase out that sort of noise, the biases, from whatever source that you're getting from. So you need a broader range of inputs. If we're trying to get information from people, you need a broad range of that. Also include yourself in that broad range and do your own work and figure out things by yourself. But you don't want to be stuck with one source of information, because that one source is going to be noisy. It's going to have a lot of bias. Is there more?
Some of these biases can be very negative. Some of them can be positive. Some of them can be neutral. Some of them don't really matter. But regardless, you're never going to find a human that doesn't have biases. Even if they're enlightened and awakened and all that, they're going to have biases. And the more you listen to them, the more the biases will get baked into you. Their biases will get baked into you. And they will limit your sense of possibilities. And so some of you can overconsume my content, consume all of my content sort of religiously. And then what I want to warn you against there is that if you're doing that, I mean, it's fine to watch all my content. I recommend you do, but you have to also balance it out with other perspectives, with other teachings and teachers, with other books and so forth, because otherwise you're going to get my biases, and you're going to let my biases limit what's possible for you.
Right, and we also don't even have a clear, Leo doesn't, he does sometimes, but he doesn't very clearly explain which videos are for beginners, which videos are for people who are more along the path already, intermediate folks, which ones are, stretching advanced or whatever. We don't know which videos are just his random interests in random subjects. It's not exactly clear when Leo is doing those things. If you pay attention, you can kind of figure it out. But if we're not paying close attention, then we can just absorb all this information where we don't need to. Like if you're a beginner, you're getting all this advanced stuff. You probably don't need that. If you're advanced and you're getting some of Leo's random interests, you probably don't need that. And you don't want to be absorbing all that bias. So you do want to be aware of all that stuff. And we don't want to be limited by the creative output of one person. How silly would that be? It's holism. Remember, we're trying to be holistic here. We're trying to be expansive. So let's not do that.
And that's going to become a problem for you. It's very important that on this journey you stay true to yourself, to your values, to your uniqueness. Customize the things that I talk about to you. Some of the things I talk about are not going to apply to you. Don't try to make them fit if they don't fit. Some of the topics that I cover them from my own personal interests, and my personal interests may not align with yours. So make sure that with my content, the important thing is not that you get hung up on the little details and on the specific examples. The important thing is that you get the big picture, you learn the overall principles, and then you use those not to become a copycat version of Leo, but to become yourself, authentically, fully yourself, while applying some of these broader life principles to help you to do that.
Isn't that nice? Again, it's very difficult to have a sort of meta language that doesn't refer to any sort of actual examples of things. And it'd be very difficult to try to explain that meta language and how it applies to specific examples without giving specific examples. And obviously he's going to be using specific examples that he likes. So if we had some sort of perfect way of speaking in some sort of meta worldview, well, then he could just give us this meta worldview without evoking or inclining us towards any particular worldview within his meta model. But since we're a little bit limited here, he has to give us a lot of particulars, a lot of specific worldviews, and we have to notice what's really going on here. Don't be attached to any particular worldview. Don't be stuck with only the range of worldviews that he's presenting. Notice that you can go beyond all of those worldviews and expand on the level of the meta worldview. Well, that's one way of thinking about it, at least. We don't want to be limited by what he's saying. Do whatever you like to do. and see how that fits in the meta worldview. But don't be caught by his worldview.
Do you see the difference?
I see the difference.
I'm not trying to create a bunch of copycat versions of myself in you. So watch out for that trap.
Okay.
And as long as you do, then stay tuned for more.
Thank you very much, Leo. Everybody like and subscribe to me, to Leo. Hopefully that was interesting to y'all. And again, if you had something of value out of that, then let me know in the comments. If you got something that was didn't sit right with you, let me know in the comments. We'll see if we can improve on that. There you go. Leo Gura, everybody. Leo Gura. Any questions too? I can answer any questions. Okay, well, Disciple wants to see about this curve. I'm very interested in these curves, so I think we'll go on and it's a short video-ish, isn't it? Let me see. The beauty of Bezier.
Before I knew about Bezier curves and splines, my idea of a curve was very basic. It was either the classic y equals x squared minus 1 or a circular arc. But curves that could move in all directions, that could do loops and all sorts of things were still a mystery to me.
So I definitely want to watch this video, but it's 30 minutes, 25 minutes, and I'm ready for lunch personally at the moment. So, well, it's my lunchtime. It's not curve time. We're not doing curves today. I'm doing lunch. So, I'll be back on Wednesday. And on Wednesday, we can certainly look at the curves and, any other number of things out there in the world that is interesting and will look pretty beautiful to me. Any number of things. I don't exactly know what this video is. Honestly, I saw the first 5 seconds too, and I had that same just interest in looking at it. But then I think it gets more complicated and math heavy, probably.
The two. This function is called linear interpolation.
Looks pretty math heavy. Looks pretty specific in geometry here. It's not just a cool, beautiful video.
But how far has it actually moved? And for that matter, how long is this curve? What is...
Okay, well. Possibly on Wednesday. I don't know. Maybe not. Also, what'd you think about the format of that video? We just watched the Leo video. I did watch it beforehand. I pre-watched it, and I wrote down notes on the parts that I liked and which parts I could add on to. And man, the runtime of that video is an hour and 45 minutes, I think. You liked it less. Hour and 45 minutes, and boy oh boy, we got through it in 2 hours. We saved so much time. That's so good. We would generally double the time of all the videos that we watch if we just watch the whole thing and hope that something interesting comes out. But now I had a more structured way of thinking about things, and man, it didn't take me so long. How cool is that? Well, anyway, that was fun for me. Maybe we'll see if we can improve it a little bit more over time. Okay. I'm off to get myself some lunch. I will be back on Wednesday, and we can chill and hang out and do the things that we like to do. Hopefully we'll find some more videos to watch in that same vein. I'll catch y'all then. Like, comment, subscribe, all that. And also take good care of yourselves. That's the most important part. I'll see you Wednesday. Bye-bye.